to the bios of my colleagues on the panel, and I'm actually a little impressed. So, a little bit impressed. I'm going to have to make up some more BS for my bio so that I can sound as impressive as them next time, if I get invited back, eh? If. Big test. Thank you very much, and thank you for taking the time to come here today. Not just, honestly, to come to this session, but to come to SUMA. Most of you do this on a voluntary basis, and those of us that live in this province and have lived here most of our lives really do appreciate your contribution. And on behalf of our Minister, Minister Ryder, my Commissioner, Commissioner Dwayne McKay, I'd like to thank you and welcome you to this portion of the presentation. I'm going to warn some folks. I am really, really attractive. It's hard to look away from me, but occasionally you will want to look up at that slide. Just warning you. And I'll try and wave my arm like that. Force yourself, turn your head, look at the slide. It just takes a sec. So I'm also going to warn you, and Bernie talked about this earlier, that he has a bit of a pet peeve with all the acronyms that government employees use. But if you heard my bio, if you were awake for that portion, many of you are asleep already. If you heard my bio, you'd have heard that I have an Army background as well. And we are absolutely famous for our TLAs. And you know what TLAs are? Those are three-letter acronyms, TLAs. So you may hear a few more yet today. We're going to buzz through this, and I'll be done in 21.3 minutes. Is that okay, Wade? All right.
19, and you got a deal.
19? All right. I'll skip out the photos of my vacation. World of emergency planning is changing. Not just changing, it has changed. It is not the same as when I started my career. It isn't the same as 50 years ago, obviously. It is different. What's changing? Severity of weather events. A lot of people think that we have a lot more severe weather events these days. Reality is, 100 years ago, 300 years ago, what kind of weather did we have in Saskatchewan? It might have been the same as we have now. The reality is, we're more vulnerable to the weather than we used to be. Our systems, our infrastructure, our children, we are all more likely to be victims now. We are more likely to be hurt by severe weather now than we were 100 years ago or 200 or 300 years ago in this province and in the world. And as the digital world increases in speed and accuracy, people from around the world share experiences almost instantaneously. That's three lines that actually means Twitter and Facebook are a pain in your life when you have an emergency. Ken's going to tell a story about that later, a very personal one, when he talks about Twitter and Facebook, etc., from somewhere else in North America. I guarantee you that anything of interest happens in your town. We used to talk about, oh, the CNN trucks might arrive, etc., etc. No. Your stuff is on CNN, CBC News World, around the country, around the world. Anyone in the world knows what's going on in your town within minutes of you having your emergency, saying something, releasing a news release, etc. It's a very small world now. It's changed. I'm going to buzz through this small world of ours. These are some of the things that are happening elsewhere in the world. Doesn't look like Saskatchewan. Could actually be happening here. Some examples. Afghanistan, they don't know. It's somewhere between 350 and 3,700 people dead from a mudslide. These are all 2014. Turkey, 300 dead, 80 injured, underground mine fire. Most of the dead from poisoning, not from, like carbon monoxide poisoning, not from fire itself. The former Yugoslavia, flooding, a third of a million, 300,000 households without electricity for an extended period of time. Imagine a third of Saskatchewan without electricity for an extended period of time. Doesn't matter if it's summer or if it's winter. It's going to hurt. It's going to cause immense disruption, immense sacrifice on behalf of people, immense hardship, financial, you name it. Train derailment in the Congo. We have trains here in Saskatchewan. We have derailments. For a while there, not long ago, it seemed like we're having one every other week. So what is happening in Saskatchewan? Again, that's what happened around the world, some big news events in 2014. That's the Qu'Appelle Valley. I don't know what this thing, there. That's the Qu'Appelle Valley. That is the Qu'Appelle Valley there. Community called Birds Point. It's on Round Lake. In the east down the Qu'Appelle Lakes chain in the Qu'Appelle Valley. Much of the Qu'Appelle Valley looked like that in 2011, and it happened again in 2012. We had some events this summer that were related to flooding. I was going to talk a little bit about what we looked at going into 2014. As we went into 2014, into the spring, we were looking at how much snowfall we had, how much snowpack we had, how much water was in the ground already, how saturated the ground was, how much storage area there was in the sloughs and the lakes and the low-lying areas and in the creeks and in the ditches and the coulees and what have you. As we were going into 2014, a lot of that was full. The ground was full, the storage areas were full, and there was a lot of snow. So we spent a lot of time working with communities, especially in the area where it was extremely well above normal for runoff potential, which was mostly up in the north central area, here and east and northeast of the Saskatoon area. That's where the big circle was on the map. That was our areas of concern. It didn't pan out that way, but what caused a bunch of flooding in the Qu'Appelle Valley and all kinds of places in east central and southeast Saskatchewan was some heavy rainfalls. We're going to talk about that in a second. Some heavy rainfalls, what is this? That caused, see that lake behind that dam up there on the top picture? Sorry, you had to look away from me. You see that, everyone? That lake doesn't have a name. All it is a bit of a ditch. It's a big, wide ditch that is almost always empty every year. No water in it. Sometimes after a rain, there's a little wee bit of water in the bottom, enough to go through a small culvert in that highway right there. That's what normal year is like. If you get 6, 8, 10 inches of rain in a matter of hours in a certain part or large area in Saskatchewan, apparently it all runs across fields because it can't go down because the ground is full of water, goes sideways, fills that ditch, takes out a highway, ends up, along with everywhere else that's happening, ends up going into the Qu'Appelle Lakes chain. Water goes downhill, floods a whole bunch of cottage owners and communities in the valley. That's what happened. We didn't have spring melt, spring runoff flooding in 2014. Not really. A couple of places, but nothing significant. We had heavy rains causing instant flooding like that. Same time, we had grass fires. We had wildfires going on in different parts of the province. I don't ever leave Regina, but I hear the province is quite large. So it's not that surprising that one area of the province is flooding, another area of the province is still frozen solid, another area of the province has got a lot of heat and dry and grass fires. And I don't think I'm going to leave Regina again. It's too big, it's too scary. All that can be happening all at the same time. Melville, Saskatchewan. This is everyday life. This is real. This is what can happen in our communities. Melville has a little reservoir just outside of their city, and all this heavy rains caused that reservoir to be really stressed, and the dam, etc., flooding around the dam, hitting the community, etc. They had to evacuate the area that was affected, and the area that was affected had the hospital and the care home. Huge operation. They had 2 emergencies going on at the same time. And think about what those are. One is the actual flooding. Oh, we have to do something to try and fight the flooding and save certain areas, etc., etc. So you got people with uniforms and equipment and doing the cool stuff, running around out there trying to fight the flooding. The other emergency they have is they have to evacuate a lot of people that are very, very vulnerable, at-risk people from the area that's being flooded. So there's 2 emergencies. There's 2 things that you as municipal leaders have to think of whenever your emergency is happening. Yeah, you got the guys doing the cool stuff at the site. The guys with the uniforms, the guys with the trucks, with the lights on them, and the cars, and the fancy and cool gear. And then you have everyone else. We have an emergency. We have to deal with all of the people affected by that emergency. We have to deal with the rest of the citizens, especially the vulnerable ones. That's who you owe it to. The guys at the site, they'll do their thing and they'll respond and what have you. And they'll let you know tactically, this is what's happening. Look after everyone else. That's who you owe it to. That's what your plan is about. Your plan isn't about response, usually. It is, but your emergency that you're responding to is, what's the impact to the people? Infrastructure is at risk. I don't know if that's titled right. Infrastructure sometimes is the risk and causes the emergency. We aren't what we used to be. Saskatchewan is not the same place it was. You think back to the time of my grandparents, our ancestors in this province. Hands up, who spent most of their life in Saskatchewan, living, working here, etc. Yeah, most of us have. This is not the same place. 20 years ago when I started in this job, I used to say my generation. I won't say that now. I'll say my children's generation are not what my grandparents were. Think of your own children and your grandchildren and, as I mentioned earlier, your idiot son-in-law. They are not the hearty pioneers that your parents and grandparents were. They aren't. If the power goes out for one day, are you as capable, or is your son-in-law as capable as your parents and grandparents were of carrying on as if it's no big deal? No. You become almost an immediate victim, an instant victim. If the power is out, something as simple as that. My grandfather, if the power went out for a week, he wouldn't notice, he wouldn't care, he would carry on. Like I said earlier, chores would get done, kids would get to school, family would get fed. No big deal. We aren't that anymore, are we? Power goes out for 10 minutes in my office building, it's an absolute chaos. It's panic. We can't even work. We stand around like looking at each other. We are instant victims. Something as simple as that. It's not the same province it was, and we aren't the same. We are more vulnerable. We are susceptible. Infrastructure is at risk, yes, and when it's at risk, it is the emergency. The absence of phone, the absence of internet. Can you function without internet? Can your kids do their homework? Does your house work? Do you sit around in your house anymore and read books and play board games? No. No. You will all probably kill each other if the internet goes down in your house, if Wi-Fi goes down in your house. It's not the same province it used to be. We aren't the hearty pioneers. We have to plan for that. Therefore, emergencies are more likely now, despite all our technology. Because of our technology, emergencies are more likely than they used to be. Because we can't deal with them as well. We have more victims, instantly. The urbanization of Saskatchewan is creating more victims. It's reality. So we have to look after them. We have to plan for it. Here's another piece of infrastructure that we're dependent on, besides the technology and the phones and the internet and the electricity, etc. The highways. Does anyone remember back in 2010, 2011, when was that? Maple Creek flood because of heavy rains in the Cypress Hills. Sorry, the last 20-some years all blur to me. I don't remember last year from 20 years ago when the emergencies. Took out Highway number 1 near Maple Creek. The highway was taken out and massive amount of rerouting of traffic. Huge, huge impact on our province. We learned a great deal about how susceptible we are to something as simple as one little highway being out and having to divert traffic around that one highway for weeks on end. Just-in-time delivery systems for grocery stores and any other stores caused a great deal of commotion, caused a great deal of problems. That is an emergency. Northern communities, even more so. Anything disrupts the transportation of goods into a northern community, huge impact. Water. I spoke about this earlier. As a municipality, this is a huge priority for you. You need emergency plan for your community, and you need it, if not for any of the other reasons, for this. You have, and hands up to prove it, how many of your communities have some sort of water treatment plant or wastewater infrastructure that you are responsible for, that you manage for your communities? Half, most, anyway. Huge deal. It's a priority for your municipality. It's a huge infrastructure investment, and it's expensive. Therefore, you have to protect it, and you need a plan to be able to respond to emergencies related to water or wastewater. You need to be able to have a plan to respond to protect them so that you don't have an emergency related to water or wastewater. City of Regina, I think it's probably one of the top 10 largest cities in Saskatchewan, isn't it, Wade? Top 10?
Be up in the top 10. Anyway.
Up in the top 10. Maybe even top 10 for importance in Saskatchewan. It is not immune to this sort of thing and has to have a pretty significant emergency planning infrastructure in that city to be able to deal with the same sorts of emergencies, the same sorts of issues that you may have in your community. Here's an example, and you can read that at your leisure, even though you'd have to look away from me. Bottom line, I'm saying water and wastewater treatment facilities can be impacted in times of emergency. And when they are impacted, you have something significant you must deal with. Like as I said, huge investment, huge importance, health concerns, safety concerns, financial issues, et cetera, for your community. Protect it. What that means is get your staff, your senior staff that are responsible for this, involved in your emergency planning. Think about this when you're developing. Don't just think we need to raise money for our fire department. We need to do things, be proactive in our community so that we can prevent water emergencies and wastewater emergencies in our community. Some of the messages we were passing out in 2010 as well as 1 year ago in advance of potential for spring flooding was do things in your community to prevent, to mitigate the resulting impacts from massive amounts of snow melt. Clear it from your city, clear it from your town. Get it out of your systems. Educate your public on what to do and what not to do, on how to manage their own water, how to manage the water around their house, the water that's in the form of snow. There's things like that you can do to lessen the impacts. We need to be prepared. Who is we? We need to be prepared. All of those victims I talked about, the idiot son-in-law, your grandchildren, etc., they need to be prepared. Just like every single one of you is prepared, because you know in Saskatchewan we don't drive around in the winter without that emergency kit in our trunk. Everyone has that, right? Everyone? Nodding, you liars. Some of you might, not everyone. Things like a 72-hour kit for your home. Everyone knows about things like fire drills for your family and this and that and candles and where's the battery and where's the flashlight. Have that stuff. There are all kinds of brochures out there, things that are accessible from us, or we can point you to links. Have that information for your community so that when you have your emergency, flooding, fire, train derailment, some sort of evacuation, it doesn't matter. Your citizens are prepared to look after themselves as best as possible for 72 hours. So that they're not instant victims, that you have to deal with them as well as trying to respond to the emergency. That's a big part of your plan. How do we educate our people so that they're not a pain for us when we have our emergencies, so that they can look after themselves a little bit? Individuals, first of all, have to be prepared. So many times myself or staff that I work with, spending time out in communities, educating them on preparedness and having an emergency plan. So many times they say, we're just a small community, we don't necessarily need to have an emergency plan like big city Regina or Saskatoon or Melville or whatever. Wrong, folks. You're more susceptible if you are a smaller community because you have less capability, you have less resources. You're more likely to be overwhelmed. So you need a plan that much more. A plan to be able to educate your community, inform them before and during your emergency, to get a hold of your neighboring communities to get them to come and help, to get a hold of our office to get us to come and help and give advice and assistance when you have your emergency. More important for the smaller community to have that plan than the larger one, frankly. Because you're more likely to be overwhelmed, therefore you're, by definition, you're more likely to have an emergency. Let's have a look at some of the communities that had some issues in 2014. Gainsborough, that's just an example. In 2014, we didn't really have a lot of spring-off flooding. We had a heavy rainfall, and then another heavy rainfall, and then another heavy rainfall, all within a week or a couple of weeks at the latter part of June and early July. Some of the reports was it's up to 200 millimeters. Anyone know how much that is? We had a debate earlier, somewhere between 8 inches and 97 feet of rain. 200 mils, I don't know, I'm old school. A lot of rain in a short amount of time. Gainsborough is one of the communities, just one of many from Melville all the way down to the border, south to the border and east to the border that was impacted. What else? Transgas explosion and fire, underground storage facility near Prudhomme, Regina Beach. Hey, Ken, did you know there was an explosion out there? Just a rumor? We'll ask him about it later when he talks, if he doesn't cover it. That's a picture from Gainsborough. I think that's from Kijiji, truck for sale, as is condition. One of the things that you have to have in your plan is if and when we need to evacuate all or any part of our community, how are we going to do that? Remember Melville having to evacuate part of that care home and the hospital? It's a big deal. Northern communities, a little more used to it because forest fires and smoke from forest fires sometimes cause them to evacuate. They're almost practiced at it, but it's still a huge disruption. It's a huge impact. Train derailment near Clare, which is near Wadena. Wadena didn't have the emergency, but they had an emergency because Clare did. And Wadena is the bigger town nearby, had to implement their emergency plan, open their operations center, be a bit of a center for information, etc. So they had one guilt by association, if you will. Regina Beach, there's December in the lower picture, the before picture, minutes before the explosion, and a picture above, minutes after, right? Regina Beach never gets any snow, if anyone was looking to retire anywhere. So, yeah. Government guy, guaranteed you knew I was going to talk about legislation, right? The Emergency Planning Act of 1989 and subsequent updates up to and included 2003 says you are responsible, your municipality is responsible at all times for the direction and control of the response to the emergency that you're having. You, your municipality. Not, oh, the province showed up to give us advice, well, let them take over. Nope, we're not taking over, we're giving you advice. When your capacity to be able to deal with it is exceeded, you go to neighboring communities, you go outside and ask for help, but you're still going to be in control even though you're being helped from outside, whether it be from Wadena or from the province. There are 9 steps to develop a plan. I'm going to buzz through them really quick. I know some of you are thinking, why do I have to memorize another 9 steps? I just memorized 12 steps last week at that meeting I was at. Everyone has their own steps. These are fairly simple though. Say, hey, we're going to make a plan. Appoint a coordinator, an EMO coordinator. In that plan, you're going to describe a structure for your emergency measures organization. You're going to identify hazards, analyze your risk. In Regina Beach, you never have to worry about massive snowstorms because you saw that picture from December. They don't have snow there ever. That isn't one they have to plan for. Compile the resources of you and your neighboring communities that you may have access to, not just physical resources, but people. Develop a system to notify all your residents and keep them informed. That's the communicate part. And then publish your plan at some point. Some communities have had issues with communication. All right, I'm going to wrap in 1 minute. We good with that, Wade? Okay. We used to talk about Coffee Row in this province. Coffee Row, gossip mongers, et cetera, trying to keep up to Coffee Row and keep ahead of them and keep them from wrecking everything with their rumors in the rumor mill. We have Coffee Row on steroids nowadays. It's called Twitter, it's called Facebook. Good luck trying to keep ahead of that. You won't, but you have to have in your plan a way to be able to deal with that, to immediately correct all the falsehoods that are out there on Twitter and Facebook, to try and respond to media requests based on something they saw on Twitter or Facebook. Your plan is going to have to include that nowadays. That's just reality. It's Coffee Row times a billion. The next one, this is no offense to my friends in the fire service. Wonderful, wonderful folks that volunteer their time. But the fire chief may not be, for your case, may be, but oftentimes may not be the best choice as the EMO coordinator for your community. Because the fire chief may be out at the scene dealing and responding. Remember how Melville had its issue? They're fighting the flood and evacuating. The fire chief may be the one out there helping command, being an incident commander at the scene, fighting a fire, fighting a flood, in charge of the staff out there on the ground, whereas back in the Emergency Operations Center, doing the plan on how to evacuate and how do we communicate all this, maybe someone else may be better. Think about that. When the government of Saskatchewan steps in, we don't step in and take over. We step up and try and give you advice and assistance and help you respond to your emergency. We have some stuff. We have some people that work with you to help you plan, to help you respond to your emergency, and we have some stuff that we show up with. We have some kit, we have some gear. A lot of that gear exists in Prince Albert, and in a matter of hours it can be down the road. Sometimes, depending on the season, we pre-position things in various parts of Saskatchewan so that it's more accessible, it's ready to be used in a region that is needed. Things like sandbags for, well, they're not often needed in January, but often they are needed in springtime for flooding, right? Wildfire fighting kit, that sort of thing. Heavy rains last year, a lot of stuff we distributed and handed out. This is some of the stuff we showed up with. We didn't show up and take over and do all the sandbagging. We showed up and delivered some stuff, showed how to use it, got out of there, went on to the next community, helped out. There's some of the examples of what all we were involved in 2014. Train derailments, water main breaks, flooding, steaming culverts is obviously prepping for spring so that they don't flood, mitigating, right, preventing. Wildfires, flood prevention, rainstorms, tornado touchdown. Storms and power outages, slumping at Last Mountain Lake. Ken will touch on that as well. Train derailments, gas fires, Regina Beach explosion. See, there it is again. So we have a plan. All government agencies work together to support communities when they have their emergency. Our office, formerly known as Office of the Fire Commissioner, and Sask EMO combined into one happy family, one branch called Emergency Management Fire Safety. We've got districts. I've got staff that can come out and help you work on your plans and help you implement your plans when you have your emergency. So we have our own operations center and we have incident levels. That really doesn't matter. That's our goal. Our goal is to shake hands with everyone in Saskatchewan. That's what I take from that photo. I think, Wade, you want to take questions at the end, correct?
Yeah, let's do that.
Thank you very much. Most of you, you know who you are that were asleep. Thank you to everyone else that did stay awake.
Introduce yourself, I guess.
Yeah.
Way to go, Ken.
I'm Ken Peters, and I'm the Emergency Measures Coordinator for Regina Beach and Buena Vista. As most of you have heard in the news, we had a little thing they now refer to us as the Big Bang Theory in December. 2014 started out the same as any year. First came January, followed by February, March, April, May, then came June. June brought to the Regina Beach area 29 inches of rain in 16 days. This led to a lot of landsliding, ground movement, infrastructure problems. They still continue, although they've slowed down now. We have one thing that's helped us out. It's called frost, so it's not quite so loose. We had to declare our first state of emergency. We had 2 in 6 months. Our first state of emergency took place. Whoops, I guess we better flip. Oh, I get to start again? No. Yeah. Okay. We had 2 state of emergencies at Regina Beach in 6 months. The first one being as a result of all the water problems, ground movement. And so we're in our infancy as an emergency management team. We were basically had just got our plan developed. It's an ongoing, forever changing document because you're always updating it as a situation comes about. You never will have it finished because every incident will give you some new ideas and some new problems. We remained in that state of emergency for 2 weeks. I want to say, first off, I really appreciate SUMA inviting me up here to speak today, especially for that jug of vodka we have on the front here. That helps us get through the afternoon. There's 3 priorities that you need to remember when you're dealing with emergency management as well. First being life, then property, and then the environment. Some of the pictures you're about to see and some of the information that's up there, I'm going to whip through it because we do have time restrictions. There was a 911 call received on December the 4th at 2:23 in the afternoon. At that time, it was given to the dispatcher that 12 homes had been destroyed, multiple fatalities with a huge explosion and fire at Green Street and 2nd Avenue. Well, Green is also an avenue. The avenues all run east and west. Green is on the west side of town, does not come as far as Center Street, and the actual site was on the east side of town. It was at 217 1st Street East. So you can see the proximity there with that indication. Both Regina Beach and Lumsden fire departments were dispatched along with the RCMP, first responders, and EMS air ambulance dispatched both their helicopters, not because they were called out to the scene, but they heard the original call and anticipated there might be a real need for them, so they came. The Regina copter was there in a matter of just a few minutes, and believe it or not, the Saskatoon helicopter was there only a few minutes after. I don't know how fast they fly, but they got there quick. Approximately, what happened in the end, as summary, there was 4 or 5 minor injuries, which we were very fortunate on, and 8 homes were destroyed. There were a lot of other homes that had severe damage and whatnot, but they're repairable. And that is an unbelievable miracle. If this had happened in July or August, we have a population of over 10,000 in the summer. It used to be a resort town, and that's why there's no snow. And now we're an actual town of about 1,500. This happened on a Wednesday afternoon, 2:30 in the afternoon or just before. If it had been in the morning around 10:30, maybe a little later, there could have been anywhere 20 people out in front of that post office. And this happened right next to our post office. You'll see in a minute a number of pictures that will show you our post office and the scene. What had occurred, Sask Energy had a gas line which ran underneath 217 1st Street to the street service. and that had a leak, had been leaking for a little bit. The pipe had deteriorated, and as a result of the gas, it exploded. Does your community have an emergency plan, and are you equipped, and do you have a team to deal with it? We had a plan, and we had a small budget to start with, and I had about 5 or 6 people that had had the basic emergency management training course. All the other people that helped us out over that next week were volunteers who were very cooperative and worked with the people that had had the basic, and it got us through the situation. We were very lucky. We should have had more. Your EMO needs phones, radios, and equipment necessary to handle the situation before it happens, not after. And a couple things I'm going to say here are not slams on our community, but are points that should come to mind because I'm sure they happen in many others as well. We had radios. I had also purchased a base radio. 2 years ago, I had given a work order to the town office to get the antennas installed. We have 2 designated command centers. One is at our cultural center and the other one is at the Leisure Time Club down at the bottom of Center Street. They're on the opposite sides of town. That way, wherever the emergency is, we have a safe haven for the command center so that we can handle the problem at hand. A year ago, I resubmitted that requisition to get those 2 antennas put up. All it was mounting the antennas, run the coax down, drill a hole, leave it dangle inside. We have the one base radio that we can just screw on the coax, plug it in, and we're away to go. December 3rd, we had an explosion. I live approximately 1 kilometer away, 14 blocks. I was sitting in my recliner chair watching Family Feud, and Steve Harvey, my dog, the little Bichon, was sitting on my lap. And I thought somebody had hit the foundation of my house with a vehicle. It just shook the whole house. The dog jumped, I jumped. I went outside right away without a coat, did a full circle of the house. Couldn't find a car to hit me. Ran out to the garage because I knew my wife was on the way home. I'm not saying I thought she hit the garage, but you know. Anyway, she was just pulling in. She was okay. The garage was okay. So I got on my cell phone and I called the town office and I spoke with Lynette, our administrator. And I was advised right away that for sure there was one house totally gone. There was nothing left of it. And I told her, she said fire and RCMP and EMS were on the way. I said I would come down and I would help with traffic. I wouldn't get too close because I know they have their hands full as it is, so I thought I would help sort of set up a perimeter and do traffic control, letting emergency equipment in only. That is an after picture of the scene. As you can see, a 2-story building, 102 years old, historic site in Regina Beach, no longer, was gone in seconds. As emergency crews arrived and began to assess the crisis situation, was determined that there was still a huge risk of further explosions and damage. We did not know if there was other leaks in the immediate area, what damage had been caused from this explosion to other lines. So we had to turn around and look at evacuating an 800-meter area. That's what we started with, approximately 3 blocks. The area was difficult to police. There's a lot of cottages. We started to set up people on intersection not to keep people out. They would crawl between the houses through the yards. Everybody wanted pictures. Everybody wanted to see what was going on. And that was a major problem, especially knowing that we could have another explosion at any time. At 4:45, our fire chief came to me and said that we need to put emergency management into effect. And I got a hold of the town office and advised them that we needed a state of emergency declared. That was done and put in by 5 o'clock that afternoon. And as a result, we set up a command center. Now, a number of the pictures you're going to see here in the next few minutes come about sort of what Colin was referring to. You can't beat Facebook and Twitter. A lot of our emergency responding equipment was not at the scene before a lot of these pictures were already on Facebook. The pictures that I have here, I got through a request putting it out. I knew I had to do this presentation, and I asked if anybody had any pictures of the immediate scene area, because when I went down, I was a few blocks away, and then when we set up the command center, we were several blocks away for safety and so that we could operate properly. I got the pictures from my daughter in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Facebook, and she had some of the best pictures that came back. There's the scene. The debris all over the street. You can see it up in the trees. There was 4-foot sections of siding of houses, boards, nails, hung out, overhanging. The fire, the house across the street to the west, the big hole in the side of it, the roof's partially gone. The man and his wife were in the house. Their 15-year-old daughter was in the basement. All their basement windows were blown out. There was debris blown into the house. None of them were seriously hurt. There was some shock, a little bit of concussion type thing. The fire and the smoke could be seen as you come over the hill from Lumsden, almost 17 miles away. Again, the debris all over the road. Not a pleasant sight. Fire chief and another firefighter there, they were wandering through looking for victims and survivors. They had to check an awful lot of houses. Like I say, we evacuated a 3-block area, so our hands were full. It was basically a very serious situation that we were not really prepared for. We were, but we weren't. It never happens at home, you know. It always happens somewhere else. Guess what? It did. Where the blue arrow is, there's a 1970-something Mercedes-Benz in immaculate condition. Sorry, was in immaculate condition. You can see all the debris piled on it. The building that's directly behind it is our post office. The postmistress was serving a customer at the counter at the time of the explosion. Another customer had just left and was out front. At the time of the explosion, it blew that wall out. There's a big hole there. Part of the roof is dangling, and the postmistress and the customer inside crawled out a back window to get to safety. The customer was in front, took Air Canada across the street. He was blown right across the street and into the side of his vehicle, which was parked on the opposite side. Fortunately, all he suffered was a minor concussion and a couple of bruises. It is unbelievable that nobody was killed. Some more of the emergency response people searching, looking for victims and anything that might need to be looked after. There's the street after the explosion. As you can see, you really can't tell where the street is. The debris that was up in the trees was blown for a good 3-block radius, 3 to 4 block radius. People were cleaning garbage and debris out of their yards and off their houses. Had damage to their houses, windows blown out. As you can see, looking up the street from down about a block away, there's the site again. 102-year-old building, landmark, destroyed. Just a quick question here. Was anybody here for the first session? I see there's one lady in the back corner. You must enjoy this session. You've been here both times. Oh, that's my wife. That's okay. No. That whole row back there, or pretty well all of it, are people from Regina Beach and Buena Vista, and one of our firefighters, and a lot of them were involved helping us out in the command center. Thank you. I'm just going to flip through some of these pictures quickly because we keep time going. Again, the foundation of that house, it's all ready for somebody to start rebuilding, unfortunately. The post office, you can see the hole in the side of the wall. That one is on the north side across from the site that was the explosion, and it too was just totally destroyed. There was a total of 8 homes that we lost that cannot be re-entered. They were deemed unsafe structurally. We had building inspectors in to go through them before we would allow anybody anywhere. Gas and water was shut off to a 4-block radius for, I guess it was about 8 days in total. Again, the damage. Windows and doors. That's a mobile home that was on the south side of the post office. Again, structurally unsafe to enter now. And you can see the debris laying on the roof. This place is almost a block away. The eaves and the windows are damaged. The shed down below the hill was damaged. Some more windows and whatnot. You can see part of the debris laying on the left side there, up against the left front corner of the house there. The famous Butler's Bluebird Cafe, 100-year-old business. Front windows were blown right out of it. It was a block and a half away. And again, looking up the street from a block away. This is the gas line that was the source. After the explosion, Sask Energy dug that all out and inspected, and there was a huge wearing crack in the pipe. Those lines had been put in approximately 1977, I believe he said. Sask Energy and Sask Power, SaskTel were there constantly over the next week, and Sask Energy is still there and will be there for months. They're replacing an awful lot of our lines, checking for further leaks and problems, but they were great to work with. They were very informative, helped us out. We had regular briefings, which were very important. We ran 3 a day, 1 in the morning, 1 at lunchtime, and 1 about 4 o'clock every day, so that everybody was updated, knew what was going on. And then we did regular press briefings, which we held about 3 blocks away from our command center. In the event you have a disaster where somebody might be killed or seriously injured, you don't want the press anywhere around there. You've got stuff on the boards, names, information, and you don't want it getting out on the press before proper authorities have dealt with next of kin and that type of thing. So you make sure you keep your media away from your command center. And we moved some Loris disposal bins in to start cleanup. Be prepared, not sorry. Have a plan, have equipment, get your volunteers trained, give them the equipment needed to operate. Money is tight, but don't be too tight, because this could happen in a split second, and they need it. On December 2nd, we were a quiet little town. We were training 5 or 6 people to be prepared. December 3rd brought reality to our doorstep. The never will happen just did. On January 9th and 10th, we had a basic emergency management course, which we hosted at Regina Beach, in which I had 27 people come forward from our town to take it and volunteer to be a part of our team. That's a huge jump from the 5 or 6 that we had to start. Your best friend in an emergency is Colin and his team at Provincial Emergency Management. They're a wealth of information, knowledge, and resources. They have contacts coming out of their yin-yang. We had 4 members of their team that spent 16 hours a day on site at our emergency command center for 7 days. And they were a great resource. They didn't tell us what to do or how to do it. They just gave us friendly little hints every so often as to something that we might want to consider. We concluded the whole event with a major debriefing of all the agencies that were involved and all of our volunteers that serve. We got an awful lot of information. Will help lead us to being better prepared in the future. Thank you for listening. I hope it's a learning experience for you. We got lucky. Hopefully this will never happen to you, but as we've learned from this explosion, you never know. So be prepared, it pays. Something else that came to my mind while I was sitting here that you might want to consider in your communities for resources and help. A lot of little towns have Lions Clubs, Kinsmen's Clubs, Optimist Clubs, Knights of Columbus, church groups. In Regina Beach, on this occasion, we used the Lions Club and we used both churches and their groups for backup personnel, for helping sit on intersections to do security, to help prepare and get food in place. They were a tremendous help to us. Keep them in mind because they can help you. Revisit and review mutual aid agreements on a regular basis, no more than annually, because those should be updated so that you know and your friends and neighbors know what you might need and when you might need it. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you. If anybody has any questions or would like any information, I'll make myself available when we're finished here, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. My name is Bernie Morton. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer in Kindersley. And we'll bring up my presentation. That's okay. Thanks, Ken. So I have been asked to come and share with you a little bit about sort of a follow-up to an article that we did in SUMA's Urban Voice magazine last year about emergency planning, and to draw on some specific experiences that we've had in Kindersley, and specifically a landfill fire that we had in 2013. So we'll talk a little bit about emergency planning and talk about some of that specific experience, similar learning experiences as Ken had. In essence, I'd say that what Colin and Ken have referenced is that events will happen. The question is, when will it hit you? And an emergency can be described as anything as small as a highway closure resulting from stranded passengers that are landing themselves onto your community looking for a place to stay. Where are you going to house them? You know, a bunch of families driving in their vehicle, all of a sudden they can't get past the highway, they're into your community, how do you help them? Or it could be something as catastrophic as a tornado that blows through your community, or a rail explosion, or in our case a landfill fire, which threatens lives and livelihoods and your home. So being prepared is something that likely each and every one of you who are in this room are partly responsible for. How many municipal elected officials in the room? Show of hands. Wow, it's great. How many staff, administrative staff in the room? And how many of you in the room are responsible directly or indirectly for either the preparation of your plan or the implementation of your plan? That's great. And how many believe that you are prepared with your plan for any type of an emergency that may come your way? That is a good show of hands. And the reason why I say that is because no plan is perfect. There's not a single plan that I've ever seen in my 20 plus years involved in municipal government, which part and parcel includes that. My first event was 1995 subway crash in Toronto that killed 3 people and injured another 30 seriously with body parts being pulled out of subway tunnels. It's a real eye-opener. And part of the plan is that, you know, there's no plan that's perfect. And the reason why there's no plan that's perfect is that there's all various components that go into both emergency planning and execution of that particular plan. The challenge for everyone in this room is to how do you move towards perfecting your plan knowing that it's not perfect? What are the things that you can do to always be striving to ensure that your taxpayers, the people who are entrusting you with implementing the plan, what are you doing to make sure that when it does hit, that you are ready? And after the event, it's doubling back to say, what did we do well? And let's replicate that. And what we didn't do well, how can we fix it and make it better? Because typically, most people, if you're driving by a car accident, most people will slow down and they'll look and they'll see the catastrophe that they're facing. Or you'll be flipping through the TV channel and you'll see the Greg Johnson, the tornado hunter, going through and capturing all these amazing images of tornadoes. But on the ground somewhere, there's a community and there's people that are dealing with that. The traffic accident that you're looking at, someone is responsible for that particular situation. So for most people, they get to look and turn away and go on with their lives. But for almost every single person in this room, you have a direct responsibility under the Act to look after your community and to be prepared. And the reason why I highlight that is because proper preparation prevents poor performance. So in Kindersley, as a result of our 2013 landfill fire, we've had a number of different incidents in Kindersley, ranging from a wildfire, grass fire. Our arena burnt down in 2010. We've had a fire on our main street. We are susceptible to tornadoes. We're in that alleyway. We've come up with a simple little acronym that we apply towards our planning. And it's, we want a safer plan for a safer community. And a safer plan with that simple little acronym is simple, adaptable, flexible, effective, and make sure you have the resources to be able to implement that particular plan. So what is simple? Well, a simple plan is not using overly complicated acronyms, but make sure that anyone who happens to be part of the implementation of your plan, and that's not only the elected officials in the administration, hopefully your plan and your organizational chart has certain members of your community who are very good at responding to emergencies, who have some background and have some training, or at least willing to be trained, willing to get the background, that they can pick up that plan and they can say, hey, I'm willing to step in and I'm willing to do my part. In Kindersley, we've recently put together a small little Coles Notes version of it that's part of all of our emergency kits that we have. And anyone can step in, they can say, you are the emergency coordinator or you are the communications person, and while you may not have any background, any experience, there may be others, but in this little cheat sheet here, it can tell you, step 1 is this, step 2 is this, and step 3 is this. So it needs to be, we would suggest, simple. Adaptable. Why does it need to be adaptable? Because maybe the person who's on the org chart, who is responsible for communications, our communications person is here in the front row. He's an expert in communications, but let's say he happens to be on vacation in Hawaii that particular week, and who's going to be their backup person? Your plan needs to be adaptable to be able to insert someone into that particular role. The personnel roles are accommodated by clearly defined operating procedures. This is what you need to do, and this is how you do it. And basically, your plan needs to be adaptable to make sure that whatever type of emergency situation you have, that your plan is able to adapt to that. Our emergency plan used to be about this thick. It grew to be about this thick, and now it's about this thick. Now, the thickness of the plan doesn't make it more effective. The thickness of the plan just basically means that we have more information in there in order for it to be more adaptable. And we've broken it all down. Landfill fires, Main Street fires, propane gas explosions, rail car derailments or oil car derailments, highway closures, all broken down by category. And in many cases, there's duplication and replication in there. But at least you can go to the tab, you can turn to it, and there it is. Easy. Flexible. The reason why we say that it needs to be flexible is that not only in terms of its adaptability, so flexibility is different than adaptability, but flexible in the case that these roles are specific to the duty and not necessarily to the staff. A good example of that is that when we had our landfill fire in 2013, on day 1 of that particular operation, after we declared our local state of emergency, how many mayors in this room? Mayors. So you are not, or should not be, the Emergency Operating Center Coordinator. You should not be that person. There are specific roles for elected officials, and when you're in an emergency, unfortunately the power shifts from council onto the mayor, onto the people who is responsible to implementing this particular plan. But there is a key role for the mayor, and the role that we had defined for our mayor is as observer. We want you to observe what is going on, and we want you to give us constant feedback, because we are living in a bubble while we're dealing with this emergency, and we want you to sit in and listen and observe. And if there's something that you think is not going well, let us know. And the reason being is that you are the chief magistrate for this municipality. Your neck is on the line. If it's not going well, we want feedback from you. And part two, you're also our chief communicator. You work with our communications person to assure the public constant reassurance that we're doing our job and that we're doing it well and we're working hard for you. And the reason why I reference that is our mayor, who I don't see him in the room at the time, was observer on day one. On day one, partway through the implementation of our particular plan during a big landfill fire, which had garnered international news, and the media had all descended on us, playing out on television, Facebook, Twitter, called me aside and said, I don't like how the plan's rolling out. I want to change our EOC coordinator. I actually want to remove that particular person, and I want you, as our chief administrative officer, I think you are more capable of doing this particular role. That's where you have to be flexible in your plan. It was a call that he was making, and it was a difficult call. And so we had to go to the person who was our EOC coordinator and saying, we're going to be making a change. There's still a very important role for you to play in the implementation of this plan, but we're making a change. The reasons why for the change are not material to the discussion today. But what is important is that your plan needs to be able to be flexible enough to be making these types of changes. A plan is only as good as its ability to be implemented. It has to be effective. And I'd say that the only way that it can be effective and that you can test it is through, at the bottom there, it says tabletop and mock exercise it. Put it through the test. Try it out. How many have actually read your plan? How many know where your emergency operating center is or centers are? Good. Then you can start and you can practice your plan. And you do that through mock exercises. And again, there's no amount of prepping that will actually really simulate a real live emergency, but planning actually helps. Again, the plan is not theoretic. It's actually practical. It needs to be a practical plan. And finally, is resources. One thing that we really found after our landfill fire in 2013, when we declared a local state of emergency and we were sort of out of commission for the better part of a week, is that in the previous iteration of our plan, that all of the resources that we felt that we needed weren't actually properly documented in that plan, and that we needed to do better. And a good example of that is that, you know, we had listed some companies who had certain types of equipment that we could access as part of our plan. Some of those companies no longer existed, or they had merged with other companies, or they had sold some of that equipment, and that wasn't available. So whoever is responsible for your plan, part of that responsibility includes reaching out to all those various resources to find out who has what to be able to help us out with whatever component of our plan that we need. Who's got the graders, and who's got the heavy equipment, and who's got, you know, the list is endless. Extra blankets and telephones and all those various things that should all be documented. And not only who are those people, where are their telephone numbers? What's their cell phone numbers? How do we reach out to them? And then there's the human resources component of it. Who within our community can help us on a variety of different, because you need the people power to be able to implement a plan. And when I say people power to implement the plan, I mean not just a plan that will last one day. In our case, our plan was implemented for more than one day, better part of a week. People get burned out. They get tired. You can't have the same person doing the same job over and over again. Who's going to fill in for that person while the other people get rest? Someone needs to do it. So why plan? Again, I indicated that proper planning prevents poor performance. And there's no plan that is perfect. There is no plan that's perfect. But if you're planning, you want to strive for perfection. You know, the legislation says that we all must have plans. Every single municipality must have a plan. But your plan shouldn't be like this particular cartoon here. My emergency plan will be ready next week. Enjoy the rest of your flight. Your plan should be ready now. And so when you go back to your municipality, if you are an elected official, ask your administrator to take a look at your plan. Read it. Analyze it. Critique it. If there's holes in it, look to make it better. Ask to sit in on your, next emergency meeting. Because why? After the fact, it's too late. You want to be prepared now. The Emergency Operator Center is the nerve center, formerly referred to as the war room. It is the place where everything happens. It's where the thinking and the planning happens. It's where you're deploying resources. At the scene, that's the incident command. And that's really, Colin had referenced earlier that your EOC coordinator or manager should not be your fire chief. Because why? Your fire chief is out dealing with the incident. He or she may be your incident commander. But they're not the EOC coordinator. One thing that we found just recently, we just budgeted for it, is, again, how many know where their EOC is? How many EOCs have emergency backup power? Excellent. Ours doesn't. Neither of our EOCs have emergency backup power. And we had a number of, earlier in the year, late 2014, we had a number of power outages, sitting in the building, which happens to be our EOC. I thought, oh, the power's gone out and I have nothing. What if this was an emergency? Where is the backup power? So it's only sort of after the fact that you think about a lot of this stuff. But if you're responsible for EOC, if you're responsible as part of your team, you should always be thinking about these particular types of things. Training. The province offers excellent training. There's, I think this year coming up in Banff is the big master conference on emergency preparedness. There's no amount of training that I would suggest is too much in order to make sure that you're well equipped. In Kindersley, our motto is experience our energy, but more recently we're considering changing it to experience our emergencies. We've had an arena fire, we've had grass fires, Main Street fire, we've had smaller landfill fires. Interestingly enough, in North America, on average per year, there are 10,000 landfill fires, if you can believe it. It's a frequent occurrence, and all of you will likely have a landfill in your jurisdiction. Are you prepared for those particular events? This was 2010 when we lost our rink to a fire, and fortunately no one was in the arena at the time. Everyone got out safely, and there were no fatalities, but that could easily have been a different case. Not only are we dealing specifically with the emergency, but there's also psychological impacts that your plan should address. Who are the people who are there to help you address the psychological impacts? And the reason why I address that is because when a community loses part of its heart, which is their arena, where families congregate to be able to watch their kids play hockey or to figure skate, when you actually rip that out of the community, there's impacts. And what ends up happening, often there's finger pointing. How did this happen? All of a sudden, we don't have this anymore. You should be thinking about the psychological impacts when you remove that from a community and when it's being removed as a result of a tragedy. So our case study here is the Kindersley landfill fire. That was taken probably about 2 hours after the fire began, just after 8 o'clock. It is an inferno, and there's no other way to describe it. Our operation moved very, very quickly from that of being trying to control the fire to a containment of the fire to try and prevent the entire western portion of our community from burning down. Right across the street, that landfill is located off of Highway 21. Literally right across the street, a stone's throw away, is a residential community. That landfill does not meet the necessary or meet the regulatory requirements in terms of proximity from a residential community to a landfill under today's regulations, which made it all the more worrisome. When it was burning out of control, we had Prince Albert on the phone regularly giving them updates and trying to make a determination at what point in time we needed to do a full evacuation of the western part of our community and to bring in water or chemical retardant bombers to lay down fire suppression material or water on the residential homes. And it was about 3 o'clock in the morning when there was a stiff breeze coming from the west at about 60 kilometers an hour that was pushing that fire from the landfill component. And our landfill is a baled landfill. It's like a condominium of baled garbage. And so each one of those bales was a fire in of itself. And the wind was blowing it towards the very vulnerable part of our landfill area, which was construction materials and debris, and also loose woods and grasses. And then just beyond that, we had our combustibles. So it was all moving toward this very, very vulnerable area. And so we had very little time to prepare and create some fire berms and barriers as the prevention, trying to prevent it from spreading to the other areas. And if it wasn't likely for Mother Nature helping us out, basically the winds died down at about 3:15 to absolutely nothing, we would have been doing a mass evacuation. So we'd say that we had done what we needed to do in order to be able to contain it, which is creating some bermings, and we had, it's quick reaction. And I got to tell you that we didn't have anything in our plan that addressed this particular situation. It was all on the ground, quick decision making that occurred in this particular case. We've now since updated our plan. Okay, great. I won't get into some of the, these are just some of the details, sort of the timelines, which the reason why I'm showing some of this is that all of this needs to be documented when you're in an emergency. Someone needs to be documenting every single aspect of the particular emergency. And you're doing this for liability reasons. You're doing it for training, but it's also something that should be part of your plan. Detailed, what are we doing step by step, who's engaged and who's involved. This lasted again for the better part of a week. We had when we declared a local state of emergency, we did it very quickly. It was merely hours after the landfill fire had started. And I think that part of that quick reaction, the reason why we declared a local state of emergency, it was beyond our ability to manage. And that should be something that you should be thinking about. Never hesitate to declare a local state of emergency. If it is beyond your ability to manage, help is out there. Colin and his team are ready. And within hours of us declaring a local state of emergency, they're on the ground helping us. First with planners, and then also with crews. These are just all the things that we ended up doing. The gallons of water that were used and the methodology that we used. And when Colin had indicated that the province doesn't insert themselves into the situation. They come to help. And you may disagree with them. And that's where, your team, imagine when you're in a local state of emergency or you've opened your EOC, you get all these people together, many of them who've never worked together before, and you say, we have an emergency, and your job is to address this. People need to be level-headed. And you could practice this in your training. One of the big decisions that we need to make was, were we going to fight this from the air, or were we going to fight it from the ground? And we had, some pretty robust discussions about that. Some of the key people from the province had thought, we will fight it from the air. Bombers coming in at a cost of probably an extra $400,000. With our fire crews and with the fire commissioner's office, they thought that they could actually fight it from the ground. And so the reason why I say this is that safety of the public is always of the most paramount importance, but you always need to be thinking about, can you afford it? There's a big difference in adding. Imagine if you have to add unexpectedly $400,000 to your costs. It's quite a bit. One of the most important components of any particular plan is doing your analysis afterwards. Figuring out what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, opportunities, a SWOT analysis. What did we learn? Well, we learned that every single emergency is a learning experience, and that there's no plan is perfect. At our landfill itself, we thought, hey, we need respirators there. Landfill fires are frequent. The toxins are unbelievable in terms of what you were breathing in. Have respirators. Community planning is an important component. of it, and no amount of communication is too much. The reason why I stress that has been indicated earlier. Facebook, Twitter, you got to get it all out there. And everything that you're doing should be effectively communicating. That's where your role of members of council and mayors play a very important component of working with your communications officer, whoever's the person who's part of that. Document, detail, communicate it, and do it regularly, do it frequently. We were fortunate to be able to use the radio to our advantage as well. And even then, even though we felt our communications were good, we found ways in which we can improve on it. And that not all citizens may be aware that emergency is actually taking place. Surprisingly enough, even though there are massive plumes of smoke, it was on the radio, it was on television, media had descended on our community during our landfill fire. There's still some members of the community who looked out and saw this big smoke and, oh, there must be something burning, but they didn't really know. So we did some door-to-door flyer delivery. Every state of emergency doesn't necessarily need to be a state of chaos. You know, how you're responding to it from a professional standpoint and a comm standpoint actually sets the barometer in terms of how your community is going to be responding. Our mutual aid agreements need to be kept up to date and always keep close contact with those other groups. We relied heavily on the Red Cross, on Salvation Army, and also on our provincial partners. I think it goes without saying that an emergency plan is never finished. It's always evolving. It's always growing. Find out who's got better plans than yours. Adapt yours to mirror theirs. We're always doing that in our community. Anything can happen. Even when you think that you're best equipped to deal with a particular situation, even you think that you're the best to be able to manage this particular ice situation, you never know. You can always trip up. But proper planning prevents poor performance. So thank you very much. Thank you for participating in this, and I hope that you don't have an event in your community.
Thank you very much, Bernie. Appreciate that. I was looking at that picture earlier, and I was thinking to myself, you know, if there was proper planning, you wouldn't have put that big sharp steel sign right in front of where somebody could run into it. You didn't see that, did you? You didn't see that coming. Yeah, perspective. There you go. So we'd like to have a couple of questions. By all means, please come up. There's microphones here, a microphone here. So please introduce yourself, speak clearly in the mic. And
good afternoon, everyone. My name is Walter Strelaski, and
welcome,
I'm from
Walter.
the city of Melville. And I want to just talk briefly about our flood. You know, when you get something bad like this happen, there's really a strong sense of isolation. And I guess I want to tell you folks that there is isolation, there is that feeling, but there are also support systems in place. At 2 o'clock on that dreadful night, at 2 o'clock in the morning, city council meeting, you know, we declared a state of emergency 2 days prior to that. 2 o'clock in the morning, a quick council meeting. All of a sudden, the hospital, the St. Paul's Lutheran Home, is being flooded. Evacuation and so on is required. We phoned Minister Reiter, advised him of that. We had kept the provincial government informed. We phoned Minister Reiter probably about 3 o'clock in the morning. Before the sun was up, there were probably 500 people out to assist us. Again, the power of Facebook and so on. By 7:30 in the morning, the emergency services out of Regina were there with 4 semi-truckloads of equipment for us. So I say it's an isolation. You feel that sense of isolation, but there are strong support systems in place. I commend Colin, Dwayne McKay, and so on. So there you are in your communities. Things can go wrong. You have to have that plan, but there is support out there. The other thing that happened, which really awed us, was the fact, guess what? Regina phoned us, Saskatoon phoned us, many communities phoned us to assist. It's a bad thing, but there is a support system in place in this province. Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you. And, you know, on that, if there are other questions, please make your way up. I can't speak for all of the different councils out there, but I know that our council in Regina has offered, you know, assistance in various forms to a number of other communities, and happy to do so. And I would suggest that if you've got fire preparedness and planning around landfill, by all means, talk to the City of Regina. We did have a major fire about 4 or 5 years ago, and actually our fire department showed up just to be there in case, but the landfill took care of it themselves. And it was a major fire, but simply by pushing earth back over top. So we do have strategic plans and ideas, and we're happy to share them. Please introduce yourself.
Barb Caird, Councillor for Ogama. I would just like to encourage everyone to make a plan in case communication isn't available as well. Like, communication is key. But what happened to us in 2010, I'm sure lots of you will remember that there was multiple fogs, lots of ice on the power lines, complicated by a big snowstorm, heavy winds. 200 power poles came down, leaving a large area of southern Saskatchewan without power. So when you have no power, it's not long until you lose your landline, you lose your cell line, you don't have OnStar, and if you have a lot of snow, that complicates things as well. So I just want to encourage you, when you're going through your plans, to also have that backup plan. What if I can't institute my call tree? How do I do that? How do I help people get to the EOC if I don't have a vehicle to get there? So I just want to encourage you to do that, because, we were lucky. It was mild, but we were without power for most of 60 hours. That's a long time. So I just encourage you to back up your backup plan.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And we did hear earlier about 72 hours, and I think it's critical that our children understand why they need to be prepared for 72 hours, that you need to carry that emergency kit in your vehicle, because you don't want to be a part of the actual problem, because now you're adding to the pandemonium that's there. So I think it is very important that we take the information we learn here, take it back and practically apply it. If there's no other questions, I really appreciate you taking the time to come out and attend, participating, taking the time to learn. And to our speakers, thank you very much, gentlemen. Well, enjoy your SUMA conference. I asked our chief of police